Tamika Jefferson, a 50-year-old parole officer with 2 decades of service at the Shelby County Parole Office, lived what appeared to be a stable life. Known for her stern professionalism, Tamika oversaw parolees with precision, her desk cluttered with case files reflecting her dedication. Among those under her supervision was Jalen Dupree, a 30-year-old parolee released in January 2018 after serving 5 years for armed robbery. Charismatic but volatile, Jalen initially seemed like just another name on her roster. However, by March, their professional relationship had taken a dark turn. The affair began subtly, almost imperceptibly. Weekly check-ins between parole officers and clients are routine, designed to ensure compliance. But for Tamika and Jalen, these meetings evolved into something more. By late spring, they were meeting secretly at a rundown motel off Beale Street, a location chosen for its anonymity. What drove them together became clearer as investigators later uncovered details. For Tamika, married to Harold Jefferson for 28 years, there was a growing sense of being unappreciated. Harold, a mechanic, was hardworking but emotionally distant. Their adult children, Keisha, 27, and Darnell, 25, had moved out, Keisha to Nashville and Darnell to Atlanta, leaving Tamika feeling increasingly isolated. Jalen, on the other hand, saw an opportunity for leverage. His charm masked a calculating nature, and he viewed Tamika not only as a companion but also as a shield against potential parole violations. Their clandestine relationship remained hidden for months, facilitated by Tamika's position of authority. As a parole officer, she falsified reports to cover Jalen's missed check-ins and minor infractions. This manipulation could have continued indefinitely if not for a medical crisis that shattered Tamika's fragile equilibrium. In early July 2018, Tamika visited a clinic complaining of fatigue and a rash. Blood tests revealed devastating news: she was HIV positive. Further analysis traced the infection to recent exposure, narrowing the time frame to her involvement with Jalen. Confronting him privately, Tamika demanded answers. Jalen admitted he had known his HIV status since 2016 but deliberately concealed it. The revelation ignited a firestorm of emotions within Tamika: betrayal, anger, and fear. Determined to exact revenge, she vowed to revoke his parole, fabricating violations such as drug use and missed appointments to justify sending him back to prison. For Jalen, the threat of returning to incarceration was intolerable. Having served 5 years for armed robbery, he understood the harsh realities of prison life. The prospect of losing his freedom filled him with fury. Investigators would later describe this moment as the tipping point, the collision of 2 deeply flawed individuals whose actions set off a chain reaction culminating in tragedy. By mid-August, the situation had reached a breaking point. On August 14, 2018, Tamika reported to work as usual, unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to collapse. That evening, her body was discovered in her office at the parole building, her throat slashed with a jagged knife. Blood soaked her desk and scattered papers, creating a gruesome tableau that shocked even seasoned investigators. The discovery marked the beginning of an investigation that would peel back the layers of deception surrounding Tamika's double life. At approximately 9 p.m., Otis Kendrick, a janitor employed by the building's maintenance staff, made a discovery that would send shockwaves through the community. As he entered Tamika Jefferson's office to clean, he found her lifeless body slumped over her desk. A half-finished report on Jalen Dupree remained open on her computer screen, a grim detail investigators would later scrutinize for clues. Otis immediately called 911, his voice trembling as he described the scene. Within minutes, officers from the Memphis Police Department arrived, securing the area and beginning the painstaking process of documenting evidence. Leading the investigation was Detective LaShonda Freeman, a 38-year-old veteran known for her meticulous approach and sharp eye for detail. Freeman's presence brought a sense of calm authority to the chaotic scene. Papers were strewn across the floor, a coffee mug lay shattered near the desk, and there were no immediate signs of the murder weapon. It was clear that a violent struggle had taken place, though the exact sequence of events remained unclear. Detective Freeman quickly established a timeline based on initial observations. Security logs showed that Tamika had signed into the building at 5:15 p.m., indicating she planned to work late. Her car was still parked in the lot outside, suggesting she hadn't left after arriving. The medical examiner, who arrived shortly after the police, estimated the time of death between 6:30 and 8 p.m. This narrow window became a focal point for the investigation, guiding efforts to identify potential suspects and witnesses. Tamika's husband, Harold Jefferson, was among the first individuals contacted. When officers reached him at his mechanic's shop, he appeared visibly shaken but cooperative. Upon arriving at the parole office, Harold broke down emotionally, describing their marriage as strained but denying any involvement in her death. He admitted they had argued earlier that morning about her long hours at work, a recurring issue in their relationship. However, Harold insisted he had been at his garage all day, working on repairs until closing time around 7 p.m. His alibi seemed plausible but lacked corroboration beyond his word, raising questions for investigators. Initial interviews with Tamika's co-workers revealed additional layers of complexity. Marva Tate, her supervisor, noted Tamika's recent change in behavior. She had become increasingly distracted and prone to unexplained absences. These observations aligned with the mounting stress Tamika faced due to her secret affair with Jalen Dupree and the fallout from her HIV diagnosis. Another co-worker mentioned overhearing Tamika speaking angrily on the phone several days prior, though the substance of the conversation was unclear. She sounded upset, the co-worker recalled. Like she was threatening someone. Suspicion naturally fell on Jalen Dupree, whose name appeared prominently in Tamika's open case file. Scheduled for a routine check-in at 6 p.m., Jalen had failed to appear, leaving no record of his whereabouts during the critical time frame surrounding Tamika's death. Freeman's team pulled his parole file, uncovering a troubling history of violence and a pending review flagged by Tamika herself. In recent weeks, she had documented alleged violations, including missed meetings and suspected drug use, that could have led to his reincarceration. While these claims were later determined to be fabricated, they underscored the tension between them and provided Jalen with a potential motive for retaliation. However, Jalen wasn't the only person under scrutiny. Harold's shaky alibi and hints from coworkers about Tamika's personal troubles widened the pool of suspects. Investigators began exploring alternative theories, including the possibility of jealousy or domestic conflict within her marriage. Yet, despite these leads, Jalen remained the primary focus of the investigation. His volatile past, combined with his absence from the check-in log and Tamika's pending review of his case, painted a damning picture. By the end of the night, the crime scene had been thoroughly documented, and key pieces of evidence collected. Blood spatter patterns suggested Tamika had been seated at her desk when attacked, likely caught off guard. A broken pen and overturned chair hinted at a brief struggle, though the lack of defensive wounds indicated she may not have fought back effectively. The absence of the murder weapon posed a significant challenge, forcing investigators to expand their search beyond the immediate vicinity of the parole office. The first order of business was revisiting Harold Jefferson's alibi. While his emotional breakdown at the crime scene suggested genuine grief, detectives needed concrete proof to either confirm or rule out his involvement. Harold admitted to marital strain but insisted he had been at work all day on August 14th. Pay stubs from his mechanic's shop corroborated his claim, showing he clocked in at 8 a.m. and left at 7 p.m. His boss, Clarence Webb, further supported this timeline, stating that Harold had been busy repairing vehicles throughout the afternoon. Despite these confirmations, Freeman remained cautious. Harold's shaky demeanor during questioning hinted at unresolved tensions in his marriage, prompting investigators to explore whether jealousy or resentment could have played a role in Tamika's murder. However, attention soon shifted decisively toward Jalen Dupree. A closer examination of Tamika's notes in Jalen's parole file revealed inconsistencies that raised red flags. For months, her reports had described him as compliant, if not exemplary, a stark contrast to the sudden allegations of missed check-ins and drug use documented in the weeks leading up to her death. Officer Tyrone Baxter flagged these discrepancies, noting how they seemed calculated rather than organic. This manipulation of records pointed to ulterior motives, perhaps retaliation for something personal between them. A search warrant executed on Jalen's apartment in South Memphis yielded critical evidence. Among his belongings, officers discovered a bloodstained shirt hidden under a pile of clothes in his bedroom closet. Forensic analysis later confirmed the blood matched Tamika's DNA. Also found was a crumpled motel receipt dated August 13, linking Jalen to one of the rundown motels off Beale Street where Tamika and he had conducted their secret meetings. These discoveries painted a damning picture, tying Jalen directly to both Tamika's professional and private lives. Jalen was tracked down at a friend's house 2 days after the murder and brought in for questioning. Sweating profusely and visibly agitated, he denied any involvement in Tamika's death. "She wanted me locked up again," he snapped when pressed about their relationship. He admitted to the affair but claimed Tamika framed him out of spite after learning of his HIV-positive status, a revelation that shocked even seasoned investigators. According to Jalen, Tamika's fury over contracting HIV drove her to falsify violations in his parole file, setting him up for reincarceration. In his telling, she was the aggressor, and he merely a victim of her vindictiveness. Freeman wasn't convinced. She pushed Jalen on his whereabouts during the critical time frame between 6:30 and 8 p.m. on August 14. Initially evasive, Jalen eventually claimed he'd spent the evening with his cousin, Malik Grayson, watching television at Malik's apartment. When questioned separately, however, Malik's account quickly unraveled. He vaguely recalled seeing Jalen earlier in the day but couldn't confirm his presence during the exact hours in question. Under scrutiny, Malik admitted he might have been mistaken, leaving Jalen without a solid alibi. Meanwhile, additional pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. Clinic records confirmed Tamika's HIV diagnosis, providing context for her erratic behavior in the weeks before her death. A colleague, Nia Caldwell, also came forward with crucial information. She revealed overhearing Tamika arguing heatedly on the phone several days prior, though she couldn't identify the caller. "I heard her say something like, 'You're going to pay for what you've done,'" Nia recounted. It sounded serious. As Freeman and her team pieced together the timeline, patterns began to emerge. Phone records showed multiple calls between Tamika and Jalen in the days leading up to her death. Their final conversation, lasting less than 2 minutes at 5:45 p.m., likely set the stage for their fatal confrontation. Evidence suggested Jalen arrived at the parole office shortly afterward, gaining access through a side entrance often used by staff. Blood spatter analysis indicated Tamika was seated at her desk when attacked, likely caught off guard. The absence of defensive wounds hinted she may have trusted her assailant or underestimated their intent. Officer Tyrone Baxter, the forensic specialist on Freeman's team, played a pivotal role in analyzing critical items recovered during the probe. The bloody shirt found in Jalen Dupree's apartment provided undeniable proof of his involvement. DNA testing confirmed that the bloodstains matched Tamika's profile, directly tying Jalen to the murder scene. Further examination revealed a partial fingerprint on the motel receipt dated August 13, an item also discovered in Jalen's possession. This fingerprint belonged to Jalen, linking him conclusively to the rundown motel where he and Tamika had conducted their clandestine meetings. Perhaps the most damning piece of evidence emerged when a knife was recovered from a dumpster 2 blocks away from the parole office. Forensic analysis showed traces of Tamika's blood on the blade, along with microscopic fragments of Jalen's skin cells, evidence suggesting he had wielded the weapon during the attack. The jagged edge of the knife matched the wounds inflicted on Tamika's throat, leaving little doubt about its role in the murder. Combined with the other physical evidence, this discovery painted a chilling picture of premeditation and violence. Security footage from cameras positioned near the parole office added another layer of confirmation. While no cameras were installed inside the building itself, external recordings captured a hooded figure entering through a side entrance at 6:20 p.m. and exiting approximately 50 minutes later at 7:10 p.m., a time frame consistent with the medical examiner's estimated window of death. Though the individual's face was obscured by a hoodie, their build and gait closely resembled Jalen's. Investigators noted that the person walked briskly upon exiting, clutching what appeared to be a dark object wrapped in cloth. a detail that aligned with witness accounts of Jalen carrying something bulky under his arm earlier that evening. Armed with this mounting body of evidence, Detective Freeman confronted Jalen once again in an intense interrogation session. She laid out the facts systematically: the bloody shirt, the motel receipt, the knife bearing both Tamika's blood and his DNA, and the security footage placing him at the scene. Under pressure, Jalen grew increasingly erratic, his composure crumbling. He dismissed the shirt as planted evidence, claiming someone must have broken into his apartment to frame him. "I didn't kill her," he insisted, though his voice betrayed uncertainty. When pressed about the knife, he doubled down, asserting it wasn't his and accusing investigators of fabricating connections. Yet, when shown the security footage, Jalen faltered, unable to provide a plausible explanation for the hooded figure's presence or actions. While Jalen remained the primary suspect, Harold Jefferson's involvement couldn't be entirely ruled out. Renewed scrutiny fell on him after one of his co-workers, Raynard Poole, recalled seeing Harold leave the garage briefly at 6 p.m. Though Harold maintained he had only stepped out to grab dinner, investigators explored whether his truck might have been used in connection with the crime. Tire track analysis near the parole office ultimately eliminated this possibility. The tread patterns did not match Harold's vehicle. Despite these findings, Harold's shaky demeanor continued to raise questions about potential emotional motives tied to his strained marriage. Nia Caldwell, Tamika's co-worker, provided yet another crucial piece of testimony. During a follow-up interview, she revealed overhearing Tamika arguing heatedly with Jalen on August 13th, the day before her murder. "She kept saying things like, 'You've ruined my life,'" Nia recounted. "It sounded personal, like it wasn't just about work." This revelation added depth to the narrative, highlighting the toxic dynamic between Tamika and Jalen and underscoring the emotional stakes driving their final confrontation. Jalen's rage over Tamika's retaliation appeared to be the most plausible explanation. By falsifying violations in his parole file, Tamika had effectively threatened his freedom, setting off a chain reaction of fear and desperation. For someone with Jalen's history of volatility and resentment, losing his liberty again may have felt like an unbearable outcome. Investigators theorized that this perceived betrayal, combined with his knowledge of Tamika's HIV diagnosis, ignited a combustible mix of anger and vengeance, culminating in the fatal attack. The key to understanding the motive lay in Tamika's medical records and phone logs. Her clinic visit on July 30th, 2018, confirmed her HIV diagnosis, a revelation that shattered her sense of stability and trust. Investigators obtained access to her call history through a subpoena, uncovering a furious conversation she had with Jalen Dupree shortly after receiving her test results. The call, logged at 4:12 p.m., lasted nearly 10 minutes and contained several heated exchanges. Witnesses described Tamika as livid during this period, and phone transcripts revealed her explicit threat to end him by revoking his parole. For Tamika, this ultimatum represented not only professional retaliation but also personal retribution for what she perceived as Jalen's deliberate deception regarding his HIV-positive status. Jalen's prison medical file, secured via a court-ordered warrant, corroborated Tamika's suspicions. It showed he had tested positive for HIV in 2016, information he never disclosed to her during their affair. This omission became a pivotal factor in unraveling the dynamics of their relationship. To Tamika, Jalen's silence equated to betrayal. To Jalen, her threat to send him back to prison represented an existential crisis. Both parties viewed themselves as victims, yet neither seemed capable of recognizing the harm they had inflicted upon each other. On the day of the murder, Jalen's actions deviated sharply from his usual routine. Scheduled for a mandatory check-in at 6 p.m., he failed to appear, instead heading directly to the parole office where Tamika worked. Security footage and witness statements placed him entering the building around 6:20 p.m. and leaving approximately 50 minutes later, a timeline consistent with the coroner's estimate of Tamika's death between 6:30 and 8 p.m. Investigators traced the knife used in the killing to a pawn shop Jalen frequented, strengthening the case against him. Records showed he purchased the weapon on August 12, just 2 days before the murder, indicating clear intent to carry out a violent act. As evidence mounted, Detective Freeman systematically ruled out alternative suspects. Harold Jefferson's alibi remained intact, supported by time-stamped receipts from his mechanic shop and corroborating statements from his boss, Clarence Webb. A thorough search of Harold's truck found no traces of blood or other incriminating evidence, effectively eliminating him as a viable suspect. Similarly, Malik Grayson, whose car Jalen borrowed on the night of the murder, was cleared when forensic analysis revealed no connection between the vehicle and the crime scene. Nia Caldwell's testimony provided additional context for Tamika's state of mind in the days leading up to her death. Nia recalled overhearing Tamika arguing with Jalen on August 13, describing the exchange as intensely personal. She kept saying things like, "You've ruined my life," Nia told investigators. This account aligned with phone records showing multiple calls between Tamika and Jalen during that time frame, suggesting escalating tension and unresolved conflict. By August 20, 2018, the case against Jalen Dupree was airtight. Armed with overwhelming physical evidence, including the bloody shirt, motel receipt, DNA matches, and the murder weapon, and bolstered by witness testimonies and documented timelines, Freeman's team moved to arrest him. Officers located Jalen at a bar in Midtown Memphis, where he resisted apprehension briefly before being subdued. Charged with first-degree murder, he was taken into custody without further incident. The convergence of evidence painted an undeniable picture. Jalen Dupree had acted out of rage and desperation, driven by Tamika's threat to revoke his parole and expose his past misdeeds. His decision to confront her at her workplace, armed with a newly purchased knife, demonstrated both premeditation and lethal intent. The tangled web of lies, manipulation, and betrayal that defined their relationship had finally unraveled, leaving devastation in its wake. Jalen Dupree's trial commenced on January 15, 2019, at the Shelby County Courthouse in Memphis, Tennessee, a somber proceeding that drew significant attention from both the legal community and the public. Prosecutor Vonda Ellison wasted no time presenting a meticulously constructed case against Jalen, weaving together physical evidence, witness testimonies, and documented timelines to paint an irrefutable picture of guilt. At the heart of her argument lay the bloody shirt found in Jalen's apartment, the knife bearing his DNA recovered from a nearby dumpster, and security footage placing him at the parole office during the critical time frame surrounding Tamika Jefferson's murder. Ellison also highlighted Tamika's HIV diagnosis as the driving motive behind the crime. She presented phone records showing Tamika's furious calls to Jalen after learning of his undisclosed HIV-positive status, emphasizing how their toxic relationship spiraled into mutual threats and retaliation. The prosecutor underscored the premeditated nature of the act by introducing pawn shop records documenting Jalen's purchase of the murder weapon on August 12, 2018, just 2 days before Tamika's death. This evidence dismantled defense attorney Quincy Lamar's argument that Jalen had acted in self-defense, provoked by Tamika's threat to revoke his parole. Key witnesses played a pivotal role in bolstering the prosecution's narrative. Nia Caldwell, Tamika's co-worker, took the stand to recount overhearing Tamika's heated phone conversation on August 13. She was yelling about making someone pay, Nia testified, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. The jury listened intently as she described Tamika's fury, providing context for the emotional volatility that preceded the murder. Dion Hargrove, a fellow parolee and acquaintance of Jalen's, offered equally damning testimony. He recounted Jalen's rant about Tamika's plan to frame him, quoting him as saying, "She's trying to bury me, I won't let her." These words resonated deeply with the prosecution's portrayal of Jalen as a man consumed by anger and desperation, willing to resort to violence to protect himself from what he perceived as existential threats. Perhaps the most poignant moment came when Harold Jefferson, Tamika's husband of 28 years, took the stand. His voice trembled as he spoke of Tamika's dedication to her work and her commitment to helping others through her role as a parole officer. Unaware of her affair until the investigation uncovered it, Harold struggled to reconcile the woman he knew with the private struggles she had concealed. Tamika was strong, hardworking, and kind, he said, his grief palpable. "I never imagined she was dealing with something like this." His testimony painted a portrait of a life marked by professionalism and duty, marred only by the secrets Tamika kept hidden even from those closest to her. Defense attorney Quincy Lamar mounted a vigorous effort to cast doubt on the prosecution's case, arguing that Jalen's actions were reactive rather than premeditated. He claimed Tamika's threats to revoke Jalen's parole represented provocation, suggesting that fear for his freedom drove Jalen to confront her. However, the premeditated purchase of the knife and Jalen's inability to provide a coherent alibi undermined these arguments. Pawn shop records dated August 12 left little room for ambiguity, establishing clear intent and negating any plausible claim of self-defense. After 6 days of testimony and deliberation, the jury retired to weigh the evidence. The decision came swiftly, delivered after just 3 hours of discussion. On February 15, 2019, they returned a unanimous verdict, guilty of first-degree murder and illegal possession of a deadly weapon. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Patrice Holloway addressed Jalen, her tone firm and unyielding. "This was a brutal, premeditated act born of rage and vengeance," she declared. "The consequences of your choices are profound and irreversible." With those words, she sentenced Jalen Dupree to life in prison without the possibility of parole, an outcome rendered final on March 1, 2019.